Hey guys, Hastings here, and welcome to the third part of my PI investigation series, where I attempt to find out if there's some way to exploit Forza's performance index system when you build a car. This time out we'll be looking at B-class cars, and the track I'm using to test them is the Road Atlanta Club Circuit. And the stock car that we've got that sits at the top of B-class on 600 PI as standard is this Shelby GT 500. It's actually a pretty nice car considering it's got 0 upgrades on it. But as per usual, I don't want to get into the specifics of each car and how that specific car drives. It's more about how you build a car, whatever it may be. So I'm not going to talk about that too much. But to run you through the other two cars that I've got, I've got a car that is built up from within B-class but slightly lower down, and that car is a Ferrari California. And I've got a car that is built up from the class below, so it's had to have a lot of upgrades on it to get it to the top of B-class because it starts off in the middle of C-class. And that car is the Infiniti, I think it's a GL 500 Coupe. I'm not actually 100% sure, I haven't written it down. I will have to go and double check, but I'll confirm that once that car gets on screen later on. So yeah, we'll start off with the GT500, and with the other two cars that I've built, I've tried to build them to replicate this car's statistics, and mainly that's in 4 key areas: power, the weight, which are sort of raw data that Forza provides that you can see as core statistics, and then I've also tried to replicate the I don't know what you call them, the statistics of the car that Forza gives it in relation to handling and braking. I don't know how accurate they are. I don't think they're particularly accurate, but they're a rough representation. So we wanted to have similar horsepower, similar weight, and similar handling and braking according to Forza. Now this car's statistics, it's got just over 660 horsepower, it weighs just under 3,900 pounds, and it's got a handling and braking stats of 4.6 and 4.8 respectively. Now, just to talk over the other two cars as well to tell you how they compare. The California, which has just been built up a little bit, has got quite a lot less horsepower. It's about 570, so nearly 100 less. But it also weighs quite a bit less as well. It weighs just under 3,800 pounds. So not significantly less, but quite a bit. But also the California is a more streamlined shape, which will help it out as well. So it just sort of swings and roundabouts, just taking a bit here and a bit there. And the statistics that that's got for handling and braking is 4.7 for handling, so that's 0.1 higher, but it's also got 4.8 for braking, so that's exactly the same. The Infiniti, that starts off at the middle of C-class, has got much closer statistics to the Shelby, but it also sort of sits in the middle as well. It's got about 650 horsepower, so that's very close to the 660 of this Shelby GT500. It weighs 3,820 pounds, which is almost slap bang in the middle of the other two, although slightly on the lighter side. And it's got a handling and braking stat of 4.6 and 4.8, which is identical to this Shelby. So that's how close the cars I've built are. The only real difference is where I've built them from. Like this Shelby I haven't built at all, like I said, and the California's built up a little bit, and the Infiniti's built up a lot. The only other difference between the cars that's sort of significant is the aspiration. The Shelby, which is on screen, is supercharged, which you might be able to hear if you're very astute. The Ferrari California, which is coming up next, is naturally aspirated, and the Infiniti, which will be coming up last, has got a twin turbo. Now, I gave each of these cars 10 laps to see what time they can do, and each one would be just a rough representation of what it could do. I wasn't pushing the cars to an ultimate limit. I was driving them around at a comfortable pace, just trying to eke out a little bit more time, sort of just above what I could do nice and consistently. So although I do make mistakes relatively often, it should be a rough representation of the car's raw pace, as opposed to me getting a lucky lap in that was ridiculously quick. So that's it talking about the Shelby, and I'll move on very shortly to the Ferrari California, as one of said mistakes appears on screen. Fantastic timing. So I'll be back very shortly. As I said, up next is the Ferrari California. But although this is the car that's probably got the most different stats in comparison to the other two cars. what it does lack in terms of probably horsepower is quite a bit down on that. It does make up for in, or I assume it makes up for in slightly better handling. So although it's not identical, it's still hopefully going to be very close. And this car is, I always find it interesting with these cars that are sort of in the middle, because I've got to pick a car that's sort of roughly similar to the Shelby to start with, because there's only a few things I can do with it. I think because this starts out as sort of in the middle of B class, I've only got about 50 PI to play with, so I couldn't do anything drastic to the car. I couldn't like do an engine swap or anything, because that would take it like up into into A class, if not into low S class, with some of the really powerful engines in there. So it's not something that's going to be tailored to me at all, really, because it's just a compromise of what I can get in. But at the same time, it's still got some of my input in the car. For example, I could, even with 10 PI, I could put a bit more power in it, which would be completely opposite of putting a roll cage in there and some weight reduction and some anti-roll bars. So that would really improve its handling, as opposed to something where you can really improve its power. But at the same time, although it could be one or the other, I've tried to make it resemble the Shelby, because I want them to still be similar. I want them to be as similar as possible, and it's just the way that I get them there that I want to be the difference. But yeah, I don't think it's just interesting, because it's like I say, it's just weighing up options, and it's a real compromise of a car build. I can't put as much as my personal preference in as I want, because I've got a replicator car, but at the same time I've still got a few things in there that I can put in that won't be in the Shelby. For example, there's things like the race differential. It doesn't actually improve the PI at all. It has no impact on the car at all. But I've got that in this car because I'm allowed to, because I'm allowed to upgrade it slightly. But the Shelby is completely stock. That could have the race differential and still have exactly the same PI. But it doesn't have it, and this car does. So it's always I always find it very interesting to do this one. Although this is only the third time out, it's probably the most interesting car to build, and that's probably why it's often probably the most different, when the other two are probably slightly more similar, because the lower class, the lower class, I always say class, the lower class car has got more room for upgrades, so it's easier to represent another car, because there's more manipulation that you can do to the stock model. And talking about that lower class car, which is the Infiniti, I did get the name wrong. I called it a GL500. Isn't that the big Mercedes G-Wagon thing? That's just me being a complete idiot. But I did get one thing right. It is to have the letter G in its name. It's the Infiniti IPL G Coupe, which will be coming up next. And I will start talking about the times, which is a very interesting thing, once that is on screen. So, yeah, like I said with this Ferrari, it was the lightest and it had the best handling, but at the same time, it was the least powerful and had the worst acceleration stat, which is something I wasn't hugely concerned with. But this had the acceleration stat according to Forza of 8.3, and both the other two cars had 8.4. So it's just, again, like I say, just weighing up things. And although this has got more handling, they've got more speed. So hopefully these cars will be nice and similar. But I think that's pretty much all I've got to say about this car. It's not the most interesting segment. And why is it whenever I go to sign off, I always find a point where we make a mistake? Just running very wide, trying to push the car a little bit too hard. Like I said, I didn't want to push all the cars ridiculously hard just to get a lucky, ridiculously fast lap in. I wanted a representative time of what the car can do, like somewhat consistently, with a better driver than I. I was just sort of pushing it slightly above my race place, which is why I'm still making mistakes. But at the same time, it should be a representative car of the cars that represent. Okay, if I can start talking now, please. It should still be a representative time of the car's actual pace, as opposed to just like a lucky lap, like I said. So yeah, I am going to stop talking about this car now, and I'll move on to the Infiniti IPL G Coupe. Great name. Lastly, but certainly not leastly, is the Infiniti IPL G Coupe. A car that I actually rather like, albeit though I did forget the name of it earlier on. And just kind of a disclaimer really, the horrible green colour is for the sake of continuity throughout the series. The stock one's always blue, the upgraded one's always red, and the one upgraded from the class below is always green. I don't know why the hell I picked green, but I did, so deal with it. And yeah, this car was rather interesting because, like I said when I was talking about the California, with this car, I've got the most personal input into the car because there's so much I can do with it. I've got to upgrade it about 150 PI points. Ow! I just clicked my finger. Unrelated. Back to the car. Yeah, I've got so much of me in this car. I could create it however I want in terms of like handling or speed orientated builds. But then again, at the same time, I've still got to build it to try and replicate the Shelby, and I think I've done a pretty good job. It weighs, let's try and do exact maths off the top of my head here. It weighs 78 pounds less, and has got 15 less horsepower. The handling stat is exactly the same, the acceleration stat is exactly the same, the launch stat is 0.1 higher, and the braking stat is exactly the same. The only slight difference is the top speed stat is considerably more. The Shelby's is 7.5 and the Infiniti's is 8.1. But that's probably due to the streamlined nature of the car in comparison to the brick that is the GT500. But yeah, I think it was a pretty nice car. All three of these cars were nice to drive. The B class is probably the ideal class for me. They're fast enough to be challenging and to sort of, I don't want to say separate the men from the boys, but there's more. Generally, the faster you go, the more difference there is in drivability. Obviously, the same amount of skill level is represented by a larger on-track gap. So they're fast enough to create a significant gap between yourself and faster or slower drivers. And so that makes it a challenge in itself to try and keep up with the guys that are faster you. But at the same time, they're slow enough to still create good racing, because generally it's all like the faster the car, the bigger the skill gap, and the slower the car even, the better the sort of close racing facility there is for it. So that's why I do generally quite like B class. Although I do just skim over it relatively often. I don't even know why. But that's really me rambling on off on a tangent, as I sort of tend to do quite a lot. So let's talk about the numbers that really matter. Let's talk about the lap times. The Shelby GT500, as a completely stock car, did a 1 minute 4.524, which was the second fastest car here. It split the two upgraded builds. Fastest car we had was, drumroll please, or not if you don't want to, never mind, the Ferrari California, setting a lap time of 1 minute 4.382. So about a tenth and a half faster than the Shelby, which means this Infiniti was unfortunately the slowest of the three, but again not by much. It did a lap time of 1 minute 4.640, so just under a tenth and a half slower than the Shelby, which was in the middle. So all three of these cars were covered by less than 0.3 of a second. And I'm inclined to believe that a 0.3 variation is, on a track this length, just outside the parameters of my personal driver error. Over 10 laps trying to do relatively consistent sort of fastest laps. I think like the Shelby maybe could have gone slightly faster or slightly slower. Like each one could overlap one position. So the Shelby could go first or second, the California could go first or second, the Shelby could go second or third, and the Infiniti could go second or third. But I think I've done enough laps in these cars to be quite consistent in them, and 0.3 around here is actually quite a big margin. It's over a 60-second lap. That's 10, I don't know, a 64-second lap. 0.3 of a second is I guess it's quite a big margin. I don't know, but yeah. So that's going to give this. We're going to basically wrap up this episode now. And all we've got left to do is add this episode score on to the previous two. Sorry for going, I think I went really quiet, I don't know, I started muttering a minute ago. I was trying to work something out that wasn't going to work. So yeah, let's add the scoring system for this series, if you haven't seen the other two, is the fastest car gets 2 points for its build type, the second fastest car gets 1 point, and the third fastest car gets nothing. And so in this specific episode, a upgraded car gets 2 points, a stock car gets 1 point, and the class below car gets nothing. And when we add that on to the scores from previously, it puts the upgraded cars in a very good position. They were already at the top of the table, so they now cemented that with 5 points. And actually, this episode has represented the previous 2 very well, with the upgraded car coming first, the stock car coming second, and the class below car coming third. So the total table is now 5 points to the upgraded cars, 3 points to the stock cars, and just the 1 point to cars upgraded from the class below. But I think we're only going to be... This is only halfway through the series. I'm going to do 3 more episodes, 1 for A class, 1 for S, and 1 for R. Once you get up into P class, I'm not very good in those cars, and all hell breaks loose with different classifications of GT cars and LMP cars and like the Infiniti thing. There's too many cars up there that are sort of very race orientated. So we're halfway through, and that is how the table stands. Thank you very much for watching, as per usual. If you are new, feel free to hit that subscribe button. If you're not new, or if you are new, either way, if you want to, hit that like button as well. That really helps me out. And also leave a comment, because I love to have comments to reply to for you guys. I don't seem to get too many, so you know, little improvements on here and there. Anyway, I'm rambling again. I've got to stop doing this. But thank you very much for watching. So until the next one, Hastings out. Goodbye.